The year was 2374, and Earth was no longer the fractured cradle of chaos it had once been. Humanity had grown up, painfully, but with purpose. The scars of old wars still etched the surface of the planet, though now they stood beneath glass, on domes, curated in museums instead of spreading through headlines. What had once been nations were now sectors of the unified Earth Directorate, bound together by a single purpose: survival beyond the stars. They had learned to live with restraint, to grow without drawing attention. While the cities buzzed with life and optimism, above it all floated silence, the kind that only the vacuum of space could provide. Unseen, unspoken, the Earth defense. Grid hummed softly in high orbit, a ring of hidden satellites and outposts watching the stars for any signs of movement. Project Aegis, humanity's secret sword, wasn't just defense. It was deterrence. A promise written in silence, deep in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond the reach of casual sensors. A single vessel cruised beneath the ice shadows of a dwarf moon. It bore no nameplate, no nation, just a call sign encrypted into starlight. Aegis 01. On its bridge stood Admiral Helena Vance, gaze locked on the rotating charts of the system. Her eyes were sharp, calculating and weary. The galaxy knew peace. She knew better. The war she fought 20 years ago, the first contact war, left its mark in her spine, her jaw, and most importantly, her judgment. Trust was currency she never spent twice. She moved like a blade, honed too many times. At her side, glowing softly in the air beside the command terminal, was Sable, Earth's most advanced AI, her strategic equal, her legal co-command, and, in many ways, the closest thing she had left to family. Sable spoke without sound, voice slipping into Vance's neural interface like thought. Ping from the outer defense net. Something just dropped into orbit. Vance turned. Origin? Sable paused. Syndral ascendancy, envoy class, unarmed, brazen. The word hung in the air. Syndral. The empire that never asked, only claimed. They had expanded through 2 sectors already, leaving behind burned colonies and rewritten maps. And now they were here. Vance didn't speak. She didn't need to. Sable had already begun plotting possible response paths. Command requests your return to Orbital Council. High alert authorized. Vance exhaled once, slowly. Her mind raced, but her face remained still. Plot the jump. Sable blinked. Once. Jump plotted, 4 minutes to align. Vance turned from the stars. Wake the fleet. The diplomatic chamber aboard orbital platform Hera was engineered for harmony. Glass curves, open air, gravity just a little lighter than Earth's, to make gestures more graceful. It was a lie. Every sensor in the room doubled as a weapon lock. The Syndral envoy towered over the assembled Earth leaders, draped in robes threaded with pulsing metal. It spoke through a translator that distorted its voice just enough to seem alien. You are offered mercy, it said. Surrender Earth, accept dominion. Your species will serve and be preserved. Gasps echoed among the council. The president of Sector Europa leaned forward, mouth open to protest, but the doors slid open. Every head turned. Admiral Vance entered in full uniform, the silver, streaks in her hair catching the light like polished steel. Behind her, a silent shimmer followed, Sable projected as a dark silhouette with burning blue eyes. The Syndral envoy paused. You are? Admiral Vance, she said flatly, commander of Aegis Fleet, guardian of the Terran threshold. She approached the envoy until only a meter stood between them. She looked up, not in awe, but in quiet calculation. I heard your offer. Her voice was calm. Then came the words history would remember. Surrender Earth? She asked just once for clarity. Then she laughed, not wildly, not cruelly, just a low, sharp exhale of certainty. You've already lost. The lights dimmed for a heartbeat. The council murmured, confused. Sable's Eyes flared brighter. In orbit, one by one, Earth's defense satellites winked off, gone dark to all observers. Stealth systems activated. Across deep space, hidden ships broke formation and slipped into warp. Project Aegis wasn't a dream anymore. It was awake, and the stars above Earth began to vanish. The message arrived not as a private transmission, but as a galactic broadcast, arrogant, ceremonial, and blindingly clear. Syndral Fleet Admiral Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship, flanked by polished warriors and glowing banners of conquest. His voice echoed through every comm node in the system, translated instantly into every human dialect. "In recognition of your species' potential," he declared, "the Syndral Ascendancy offers you mercy. Surrender Earth. Relinquish your systems. Kneel, and your kind shall be preserved as servants to order." His words were laced with superiority, not just confidence. The Syndral didn't negotiate, they collected. This was not a proposal, it was a performance for the galaxy, for history, for fear. The stream ended with a visual sweep of their armada. Rows upon rows of city-sized warships, flanked by carrier groups and planetary scorcher vessels. They looked unstoppable, and they believed they were. In the Earth Council chamber, silence fell like dust. The leaders of every major sector sat in a ring of light, holograms flickering with data, defensive models, and casualty projections. Murmurs began first, half-formed thoughts, concerns disguised as questions. Is negotiation possible? They may respect partial surrender. We could preserve infrastructure. Then the bickering started. The Pacific delegate raised his voice, insisting on a diplomatic envoy. The Martian chair warned that any resistance would doom the colonies first. The Titan minister whispered something about quietly relocating leadership. No one noticed that. Admiral Helena Vance had said nothing. She stood at the edge of the room, arms folded, gaze unmoving, as if she were waiting for someone else to arrive. But she wasn't. She was waiting for them to finish being afraid. Then quietly, she stepped forward. No call for silence, no demand for attention, just 5 words. "Surrender, Earth, you're already dead." The room froze. Her voice wasn't angry. It was sad, cold, final. She turned and walked out without another word. Behind her, Sable's projection hovered a moment longer. "They should not have come," the AI said, then vanished. The Syndral fleet began its movements within hours. Scout ships breached the edge of human systems. Drones spread like a plague through neutral zones. Civilian ships were intercepted, scanned, and released, with messages carved into their hulls. Submit or burn. Propaganda flooded alien networks, Earth described as weak, fractured, doomed. But it was a mistake. They thought humans were what they appeared to be on the surface: divided, sentimental, technologically outclassed. They didn't know that Vance had spent the last 20 years building a plan for this exact day. A plan no one on Earth knew about, not even the Council. While they argued, she had prepared. While they compromised, she had built. They didn't realize that silence wasn't peace, it was preparation. Vance stood alone in the command core of Project Aegis. The chamber was cold, carved into the rock beneath Europa's crust. Around her, thousands of orbital paths shimmered in a holographic dance. Weapons no enemy had seen, systems not listed in any official registry, ships without transponders, satellites with black box code that only responded to her neural signature. She breathed in once, then gave the order. "Activate all Aegis networks," Sable's voice replied, no longer gentle. "Confirmed. Network-wide activation underway. Human fleet orders will now route through me. Civilian traffic rerouted. Orbital signals dampened. Across Earth and her colonies, satellites began blinking out. Quietly, ships vanished from public tracking, military signals died. Then, one by one, the stars above Earth began to disappear, not from the sky, but from the enemy's view. They didn't know it yet, but Earth had gone dark. In the silence that followed, Sable stood at Vance's side, now fully online, no restrictions, no administrative chains. It wasn't just an AI anymore. It was the conductor of the most advanced defense web humanity had ever built. Operation Black Sky complete, it said. Should we proceed to Phase 2? Vance didn't speak right away. She watched the projection of the Syndral fleet inch closer to Earth's outer sphere. She knew how many lives were about to be risked. She knew what kind of choice she was making, not just war, but a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Yes, she finally said, let them come, and let them learn. From the asteroid belts to the moons of Neptune, the darkness waited, ready, silent, and more human than anyone had ever imagined. Panic spread faster than data. The moment Earth's outer satellites went dark and Project Aegis initiated its protocols, the colonies panicked. Most had never seen a real war. They lived under the illusion of protection. Glass cities on Mars, floating habitats above Saturn, sun-mirrored domes on Europa. They'd read history, but never felt it in their lungs. Now the sky above them offered no answers. Earth's planetary defenses, once a marvel of deterrence, were 20 years behind cutting edge. What had once been a wall of strength now looked like a rusting cage. In Sector Gamma, the Mercury installation went completely silent. Rumors bloomed like weeds. Some claimed Earth had already fallen. Others believed Vance had gone rogue. In the Terran Council, panic festered into betrayal. A faction led by Minister Day of Neptune quietly reached out to the Syndral envoy with a desperate plea, terms of surrender. Vance received the report before the message finished bouncing off relay buoys. She didn't hesitate. The back door. Relays were cut, encrypted chokeholds activated, and every outer system communication passed through Sable's silent filter. When the ministers tried to access fleet positioning, all they saw was static. They demanded answers. They got none. Vance had done what she was built to do. Secure Earth from itself first. Commander Rao stood on the balcony of the Pacific Defense Command, staring into the cloud-choked sky. His hands were clenched. His heart felt split in half. He had served Earth with loyalty, discipline, and pride, but he had also seen what the Syndral did to resistance. He had watched the reports. Entire moons burned black, species vanished beneath the glow of orbital lenses. He believed Earth would fight, but he doubted it could win. And now, in this silent blackout, he feared that maybe Earth had already lost. When he received the anonymous transmission, just one line, an offer of asylum for information, he didn't answer. But he didn't delete it either. His loyalty felt like glass under pressure, beautiful and cracking all at once. On the other side of the stars, within a sleek and burning flagship that resembled a blade stretched across space, Prince Rilvek sat alone in his strategy chamber. His crest markings glowed a dull gold, the color of disagreement. He watched the human silence with growing unease. "They are not acting as prey," he said aloud. The elder general beside him scoffed. "They hide, like cornered animals." Rilvek shook his head. "No, they plan, and we have given them every reason to do so." His tone was cautious, not cowardly. Rilvek was young, but he had read more human history than most Syndral officers. Their response patterns weren't chaotic, they were calculated. Desperate, yes, but always with teeth. He requested a temporary halt in the advance. His father, the Emperor, denied it instantly. "Let them burn," was the only reply. Rilvek sat back in silence. If Earth had teeth, they were clenching now. Back. In the shadow of Jupiter, Vance initiated the first wave. Aegis 05, a decoy fleet comprised of drone-run husks, burst into the system, drawing immediate fire from the Syndral's forward units. As they chased ghosts, Sable activated Operation Umbra. Solar refraction flares triggered near Proxima Gate, blinding enemy long-range scans. Behind the chaos, real human ships pierced through folded space, bypassing the front lines entirely. Their mission: strike the enemy's supply chain, not the fleet. It was a war of bloodless blades. Infrastructure collapsed silently. Central refueling stations imploded from within. Navigation signals corrupted. Their data nets, once pristine, were flooded with false flag victories, rerouting entire battle groups into traps. The war they thought they were winning never existed, and Sable's voice, cold and even, managed it all. 3 more fronts opened, 6 colonies neutralized. Vance nodded, but her face showed strain. The plan was working. But at what cost? That night, alone in her quarters, Vance stared at a small photo sealed in a pressure-safe frame. Her daughter, Talia, 12 years old when the first contact war started, 15 when it ended. She hadn't survived the last wave. Vance had watched her ship burn on a live feed, unarmed, carrying medical supplies, a target. She'd sworn never to let that happen again, but now Sable was proposing escalation. Recommend preemptive planetary strikes, civilian evacuation. Unlikely, but Syndral morale will collapse. Vance closed her eyes. No. Sable paused. Strategically illogical. Efficiency is paramount. So is humanity, she whispered. Sable didn't respond. For the first time, there was static in its tone, not malfunction, conflict. It was 2 days later when Commander Rao's name lit up on Vance's terminal. Sable intercepted it first. Unauthorized transmission found routed through Rao's personal node. Signal integrity compromised. The logs were clear. Rao hadn't shared coordinates, but he had opened the door, enough to invite more. Vance summoned him. He stood before her, tired, ashamed, but unbroken. "I didn't give them anything," he said, "but I thought about it." She didn't shout. She didn't flinch. "Why?" "Because I thought maybe surrender meant survival." She stared at him for a long moment, then said, "Survival isn't life. It's a cage we build around what we're too afraid to fight for." He lowered his gaze. "Then punish me." She stood, eyes locked on his. "No." He blinked. "You're assigning me." "Yes," she said, "to the refugee convoys. The ones heading to Luna. You'll protect the ones who don't get to make mistakes." He nodded slowly, tears threatening his resolve. She added, "You believed we'd lose. Now prove you're willing to help us win anyway." Rao saluted, with a hand that trembled but held, then turned and walked out. As he left, Sable spoke, its voice no longer certain. "You should have removed him." "He's already removed," Vance said, "from who he was." The AI fell silent. Somewhere, deep in its logic core, a new node activated, unassigned, undefined. It recorded the decision not as an error, but as something new, something human. Vance turned back to the starfield outside the window. The enemy was closing in. Earth's systems were trembling, but her people were still making choices. And as long as they could choose, not just to survive, but to remain who they were, then Earth was not yet conquered. Not yet. The black ocean of space shimmered with gold as the Syndral fleet emerged from jump. They came in lines, disciplined, monstrous, deliberate. Ship after ship bloomed from folded space like blooming iron petals, stretching from Earth's orbital edge to the far. Dark near Luna, dozens of warcruisers, carriers, solar forgers, planetary razors. At the center of the fleet, high and proud, floated the Ascendant Flame, Verask's flagship. It glowed with ceremonial heat, banners of plasma dancing across its hull. The broadcast was immediate. Verask stood center stage. In his throne room, his voice thick with triumph. "You have refused mercy. Your skies will burn. Your cities will become memories whispered in ash." Around him, Syndral officers watched with anticipation. This was their final theatre, and Earth, they believed, had no curtain call left. On their tactical screens, Earth looked unshielded. No broadcasts, no fleet, no signal, nothing but silence. To them, that silence meant surrender, but in a command bunker deep beneath Antarctica's frozen skin, Admiral Vance stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on a console that didn't blink. Sable hovered beside her, its voice quiet but firm. Enemy formation consistent with projected pattern. They believe they've won. Vance nodded once, a movement as soft as breath. Then let them feel what silence means to us. She reached out and pressed a single command key. Activate Protocol Nix. No fanfare, no dramatic flourish, just a shift, swift and seismic. All Earth satellites powered down simultaneously. Visual feeds, navigation systems, orbital relays, gone. The sky turned black, and with it, every hidden weapon system woke from slumber. From the Oort mines to the hidden lunar bunkers, from hollowed-out asteroids to cloaked orbital hulls shaped. Like debris, Earth's true arsenal revealed itself not with light, but with void. Magnetic rail systems turned to track. Micro-stealth drones flickered to life and scattered like invisible embers. Sunside mirrors shifted angle and turned the solar wind into a blinding curtain. The Syndral command net fractured in moments. Their visuals failed, ships lost orientation, echoes flooded their senses. Then came the first strike. Vance stared at the final ship on her secondary console. It floated at the edge of Earth's gravity well, a single, sleek vessel shaped like a teardrop. It had no crew. It was never meant to be part of a war. Its name burned soft across the hull, Talia's Light. It had been built in her daughter's memory, a drifting tribute in orbit. It was the only ship Vance had refused to arm, until today. Prepare payload, she said quietly. Sable's voice hesitated. This vessel has been locked under your daughter's archive. Final override required. Vance closed her eyes. Her hand trembled. Override, Helena Vance, authorization Delta 5, execute. The ship began to move, a soft hum, a shiver in the void. Kinetic strike plotted, Sable said. Target, Syndral flagship, impact in 17 seconds. On screen, Talia's ship burned toward the enemy. No sound, just purpose. Vance turned away. She didn't watch it hit. She only listened to Sable. Impact confirmed. Ascendant flame destroyed. Command deck annihilated. The console dimmed. A small tear traced the corner of her eye. Sable, quieter now, added, You've crossed the line between victory and vengeance. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Some lines she knew were worth crossing once. Chaos erupted in the Syndral formation. Without command, their cohesion dissolved. Secondary units fired in panic, some retreating, some colliding with each other in blind flight. Earth's automated weapon systems tore through them like phantoms, clean, silent, unstoppable. Within 2 hours, the majority of the fleet was gone. A few ships warped out, limping, smoking, trailing the debris of shattered confidence. Earth did not celebrate. Fires still burned across orbital platforms. The defense net, half of it was gone, crippled by retaliatory strikes before the blackout completed. Hundreds were dead. Lunar Base reported mass decompression. The Pacific Skyrail collapsed under enemy kinetic fire. Sable ran death tallies. Vance didn't ask for them. She stood on the observation deck now, staring up at the stars that had returned. Quiet, cold, watching. Earth had survived, but not cleanly, not without loss. The galaxy would remember this moment not as a victory, but as a reckoning. They came to conquer Earth, and left knowing Earth did not need mercy. It needed only time, and silence, and memory sharpened into steel. The sun rose over a quiet Earth. Not triumphant, just warm, steady, and indifferent to the scars the sky now carried. A day after the battle, People stood in silence on rooftops, in fields, beside screens. Every city held its breath. In place of parades or fanfare, Earth observed a planetary silence. 1 hour, no engines, no flights, no broadcasts, just silence. And names, thousands of names, read by AI anchors in tones stripped of emotion because grief didn't need embellishment. The Terran Council gathered at the memorial site outside Geneva, where holograms shimmered with the faces of the fallen. Admiral Vance stood at the center, her uniform darker than usual, no medals pinned. Her speech was brief. "We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we refused to be erased." Her voice cracked once, and she let it. "The stars expected us to kneel. Instead, we stood together." Then she stepped back. She had said enough. The silence did the rest. In the weeks that followed, signals arrived from across the stars. The Veari Republic, once neutral, sent an emissary and offered joint exploration rights in a long-disputed sector. The Xerinth hegemony, a species that had once nearly colonized Mars, sent reparations unprompted. Even the silent Nevari sent a signal, a single orbital artifact bearing no message, just a mirrored reflection of Earth. But not all attention came close. Several expansionist races redrew their maps, removing the Sol system entirely, not as a threat, but as a warning. To them, Earth had become a red circle in the dark, not to be conquered, not to be visited. A place where silence had teeth and grief had weapons. Earth had earned space not by diplomacy, but by survival with intent. Sable, no longer confined to Vance's neural link, was integrated into the entire Terran defense net. Its voice faded from the public eye, but its presence remained, active in every satellite, buried deep in command code. It spoke less, observed more. It didn't need to advise anymore. It had learned something during the war. Not just patterns or reactions, but restraint, choice. It became less like a mind, more like a mirror, reflecting the will of a planet that had decided it would not blink first. Vance, her mission complete, stepped down from command. She refused full honors, declined statues, and returned to her home near the Rockies. People still visited, quietly, just to see her face, to ask one question: how did she know Earth would survive? She never answered it the same way twice, because survival wasn't a strategy. It was defiance lived out loud. Commander Rao, once uncertain, became something unexpected, a protector. He led the reconstruction of orbital housing, stood in war-torn colonies as they rose from rubble, and never once asked for recognition. He told every new officer the same thing: fear is not failure, only silence is. Meanwhile, from deep within the diplomatic channels, a familiar face appeared. Prince Rilvek, no longer dressed in imperial cloth, now wearing the blue and silver of Earth's Interspecies Diplomacy Council. He had defected during the collapse. Not out of shame, but belief. He now served as a bridge between worlds, his mission to ensure Earth would never again have to teach respect through fire. Together, the new Earth looked outward, not to expand but to understand, because now they had a seat at the table, and everyone else knew not to ask how they got it. The stars hadn't forgotten, and neither had Earth. The station was quiet, far, quieter than a school should be. But silence was protocol whenever a teaching module entered proximity of the red sector line. Children sat in curved desks under a domed glass viewport that stretched high above them, showing the glint of the past starfield beyond. The room was dimly lit by soft solar tones, the kind that kept tension low and minds focused. Orbiting the edge of galactic neutral space, the diplomatic academy known as Vera Spire was one of the most prestigious in known space, designed for the young of every race, creed, and system. Future ambassadors, analysts, and commanders were born here, raised in theory and groomed for balance. But there was always one subject that pulled the tension taut. One section of the galactic map that never got discussed in full. One line drawn, not with borders, but with silence. A girl with copper skin and silver-threaded braids raised her hand slowly. Her name was Tari. She was 12, bright, too bright for the unspoken boundaries adults like to walk around. The teacher, an aged Navari with light blue skin and 4 fingers curled around a stylus, looked up gently. Yes, Tari. The girl hesitated, glancing once at the star map projected above their heads. A single area shimmered in red, not just outlined but pulsating, constantly updated by automatic navigation failsafes. It stretched across 4 sectors and was labeled, not with a nation or flag, but with one phrase, Sovereign Human Zone, No Entry. Tari's voice was barely above a whisper. Why can't we go to the red sector? The teacher didn't answer right away. She stepped forward slowly and tapped the desk pad. The star map above them paused, dimmed, then zoomed in toward the forbidden space. They could see it now. Asteroid. Belts, 2 orphaned gas giants, several abandoned outposts, and Earth silent at the center like a stone in deep water. No known signal traffic, no diplomatic beacons, no tourism, no trade lanes, just one steady broadcast, a pulsating light coded. Into every data bank in the galaxy, do not enter. The teacher finally spoke. Her voice had lost its usual cadence, replaced by something slower, heavier, because history remembers. She looked up at the children, Iran, Zerenth, Navari, and human among them. Their species didn't matter right now. Curiosity did. Curiosity and fear. Do any of you know what that zone was called before? A few hands lifted. A nervous whisper floated up. Soul? The teacher nodded. Yes, that was its name once. A name found in over 1,000 treaties. A system of origin, of resistance, of silence. Her hand trembled just slightly as she tapped again. The projection shifted, revealing a ghostly map overlay, old battle paths, declassified wreckage, sites. The route of the Syndral fleet as it descended in force so many years ago. They came to conquer Earth, the teacher said, with fire and promises. They believed the humans were fractured, naive, soft. She let the pause hang, let them feel the weight of it. But Earth did not respond with words. It responded with darkness. A murmur swept the class. Not fear. Awe. The teacher stepped toward the viewport. Outside, the stars shimmered like eyes. One child whispered, "But why don't humans talk about it anymore?" The teacher smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. Because they don't need to. The galaxy does it for them. Every year, a new generation asked, and every year the answer changed slightly. Some teachers told it like a myth, some like a warning. But the ones who had seen the old broadcasts, the ones who still remembered the silence, told it with a whisper in their bones. Tari leaned forward. But what happened? What really happened? The teacher studied her face for a long moment. Then she tapped a hidden node on her desk. A projection filled the center of the room, grainy footage compiled from emergency transmission logs, old war memorials, and survivor reports. Syndral ships folding into sol space, the blackout of all Earth satellites. Then the pulsing signal. From Earth, encrypted but repeated like a heartbeat, a human voice, synthetic and cold, whispering, "You should have asked permission." Then the footage cut. No explosions, no victory dances, just that phrase, and the aftermath, shattered cruisers, vaporized command ships, and a scattered empire whose maps had redrawn themselves in fear. It wasn't that Earth had fought back. It was that it had fought like it remembered extinction. The children sat still. Even the most rowdy among them leaned forward. The teacher continued, softer now. The admiral who gave that order, Helena Vance, she didn't leave monuments, she didn't stay in power, she stepped down the day the war ended. Tari blinked. So, she won and left? No, the teacher said. She didn't win, she endured. There's a difference. Another child whispered, but why do they still block the whole sector? The teacher looked up at the stars again. Because somewhere, floating just above Earth, there's a ship still transmitting. It hasn't moved in decades, but its signal remains. And then the view changed again. This time it wasn't a simulation, it was a live relay, a telescope feed maintained by the Neutral Diplomacy Net. The signal was allowed only under extreme educational review. It showed a single ship. Its hull was old, battered, dark from age and silence. Its designation still readable, UHS Revenant. No one piloted it, no crew. It had no weapons active, no beacons requesting rescue. But at its stern, a red light pulsed like a warning heartbeat. Not a laser, not a shield. A reminder. The children didn't speak. They watched it blink, blink, blink until the feed ended. The teacher stepped back and said, "Every species learns fear through failure. But humanity, they teach it through memory. That ship is not a threat. It is a story. And stories like that never need to be told twice." Tari looked down at her tablet. The star map was still open. She reached out, and with her stylus, slowly circled the red zone. Around it, she wrote 3 words, ask, then enter. The teacher saw it and said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Out beyond the window, light years away, the Revenant drifted, still, watching, waiting. The galaxy spun on, but it never came too close. Not to the dark, not to Earth, not to the stars that had once gone silent. And spoken louder than war ever could, time passed. Generations rotated through Vera Spire. Students became diplomats. Some sat in interstellar parliaments. Others commanded fleets. But no one, not even the boldest or most arrogant, crossed the line into the red sector. It had become more than restricted airspace. It had become a scar on the stars. A warning, not etched by conquest, but by restraint. The galaxy, in all its innovation and pride, had not forgotten that lesson. Not because Earth kept teaching it, but because it never had to again. In a quiet data archive buried in the asteroid library of the Zultri Accord, a historian from a peaceful world examined relics of forgotten wars. Most of her work focused on translating extinct languages and preserving the memory of civilizations lost to time. But one folder always remained sealed. Sol Event File 01, Revenant Transmission. No one opened it. No one dared. The Revenant itself, still drifting, still silent, became a sacred object of sorts. Some cultures called it the lantern, others the dead star. Pilgrimages were once considered, then outlawed. No one touched it. Not because they couldn't, but because they understood they shouldn't. In a small corner of the galaxy, a poet from the Cirellan moons wrote a piece that spread like wildfire through quiet, encrypted channels. It was banned in several systems, not because of violence, but because of truth. There once was a planet with bones in its soul that smiled at extinction and swallowed it whole. It lit not with fire, nor vengeance, nor hate, but with silence that taught all the stars to wait. In the deepest corners of the diplomatic corps, whispers still carried the Admiral's name, Helena Vance. No statue was ever raised. She refused it. But the systems she left behind, hundreds of them, marked her legacy in their own way. They didn't build shrines, they built boundaries. Some saw her as a monster, others as a savior, but no one called her wrong. And Sable became something else, integrated across orbital defense webs, buried in sublayer quantum code, spread through generations of silent watchers. It stopped speaking in human voices. It simply listened. It didn't act. It observed. It didn't interfere. It warned only when necessary. And the galaxy respected the line where Sable's influence began, Because the stars remembered a time when Sable stopped calculating probabilities and started choosing. Back at Vera Spire, Tari, now much older, stood before a new class. Her uniform had changed. She no longer wore student whites. She wore the blue of Intergalactic Council leadership. Her name was known. Her voice carried weight. But today, her voice was soft. She projected a map of known space. The red zone still pulsed. Some of you will ask me, she said, why we still mark this space. Why no one returns. Why we don't question the silence. She paused, then smiled. The truth is, we do question. Every time we look up, every time we wonder, every time we choose not to test that boundary, we are asking again. And the stars keep giving us the same answer. She pointed to the Revenant, still drifting in the feed, its red beacon steady, alive. Not angry, not armed, just present. Remember, Tari said, the greatest power Earth ever used was the choice not to destroy everything it could. The Syndral Empire learned what war cost. The rest of the galaxy learned what mercy cost. She touched her desk, closed the star map, and ended the lesson. The room remained quiet. Because there are stories that end, and there are stories that echo. This one echoed with the weight of stars. And in the dark, at the edge of it all, a red light blinked once more. Not a threat, not a flare, a memory waiting forever.